Okay, welcome. Today I wanted to offer some reflections about looked after children, what Joy Chevron talks about looked after children, and just have a look at the difference between those who go into the care system and those that go into the boarding system. So, okay, enjoy. Yeah, so at the weekend I was at a birthday party of a friend's 50th, and while I was there, I was speaking to a lady who was working for Lancashire care services for children, and we were having a discussion about what I did for my work and what she did, and she said, yeah, I kind of liaise with the children to find out if they've got all their needs met, and we were just comparing notes, and I was like, wow, yeah. And so that's what I want to talk a little bit about today. So one of the things I noticed as she was reflecting, she said that when a child is separated from their parents, from their home, immediately they get assigned a social worker. And she said the reason for that is that they know that it is traumatic for them to leave the family. And I was saying, what happens with boarders? I said, well, we have the same thing. She says, yeah, of course. And I said, but for us, it's seen as a privilege, this separation. And she's like, wow, I'd never even thought of it like that. And that's what I'm seeing more and more as I do this work, is that those who work in mainstream or who haven't been to boarding school, essentially it's 1% who go to boarding school, 99% don't. I know it used to be a lot more, so there's more out there. I think Alex Renton feels there's 2 to 3 million boarders alive in the UK, and obviously a lot more around the world. But this sense that it really kind of the 99%, they don't realize the impact that having this 1%, the 99% see the importance of attachment, see the importance of parenting. It's said that when a child is separated from the parents, it's like the parents do everything they can to keep hold of the children. Whereas in the upper classes, it's like, go on. They want them to go. And I wanted just to read out what Joy Chevron says in her book, Boarding School Syndrome. She's saying, this is the NSPCC, and just to work out what the NSPCC stands for, the National Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children. That's it's fascinating. So it says it's kind of looked after children and young people. It's generally used to mean those looked after by the state. The term is also used to describe accommodated children and young people who are looked after on a voluntary basis at the request of or by agreement with their parents. We refer to these children as children in care. So those who are at boarding school are children in care. So according to this model that I was speaking to this lady about on Saturday, every child should have a social worker who go to boarding school by this same model that, the NSPCC is saying that the children who go to boarding school are children in care, and all children who go into care get a social worker. That's what happens for everyone, in the state. So why doesn't that happen at boarding school? Because we know, if we're kind of starting to question this, we know that we needed that support. And some of the points I wanted to just make out is that, the thing with having someone regular keeping an eye on you, social worker, they're going to see, right, how are you getting on? You build up that rapport, you build up that trust. You see them, a couple of times a week, at least once a week. You build up that rapport, and therefore it's like, right, okay, I can see that child is struggling. When a child's at home, the child might not share that they're struggling at school, but the parent knows. They're crying. Why won't they come out? What's wrong with them? And then they work out. Right. But we miss these cues when we're the parents who send their child to school, they miss those cues. They don't see the child doing that. So, you know, as I was saying this, it's like, yeah, we have different standards. One is seen as a privilege. The other is seen as, yeah, it's trauma. They need support. The other's not seen as trauma. And yet I would contest, and this is what this lady was saying, along the same lines, is that is also trauma. And that's what Joy Chevron, Nick Duffel, myself say. The separation is trauma, So, yeah, I think that's really what I just wanted to share, is this idea that we have differing standards. One is seen as a privilege, one is seen as trauma. And actually, both need to be seen as trauma. And the schools, they say the systems have changed, and I believe that in boarding schools the systems have changed. That the abusive teachers that were in my school and in many others, they're not there anymore. Okay, great, brilliant work. But you still have peer-on-peer bullying going on, peer-on-peer abuse. Everyone's invited. That's what it's saying in there, that there's still rape, there's still sexual abuse going on in these schools. Westminster was a case, So this is really important, that actually these children still need that social worker who go to boarding school. They still need that one-on-one care. And I talk about this a little bit in my book, about that need for adults. I needed that, and I didn't really have it. In a boarding house, you have 50, 60, I've heard 70 to 1 boarding parent, or housemaster, house parent. That's 1 or 2 people to keep an eye on 50, 60, 70 boys. Not possible, and especially if you have 1 or 2 boys, which Richard Beard talks about in his book Sad Little Men, saying that there's always one Costos, the person who's bullied, and they're the ones the housemaster is going to spend the most time with, probably trying to sort them out. So the rest of us, we just have to find our own solutions. So yeah, I will do an update in another video about my book and my podcast. I've got Nick Duffel coming on my podcast next Wednesday, and that will go live on the Friday. So what I ask, if you have questions, I'm going to send them out this afternoon. So if you do have questions, please put them in the comments below. Might not be able to get to all of them now, because I've got quite a few. But I'll be talking to him about dissociation, about homesickness, bereavement, and relationships as well. That's one of the key areas that I work in. And I've also spoken to Joy Chevron as well about coming back on the podcast. So she will come back in November, and Richard Beard's talking about potentially December. So some exciting things. So yeah, I'll do an update for my book as well. Okay, well, thank you so much for listening to this, and just some ideas, some reflections about looked after children. So be well.